All right, let's take that little segment of just solids in that spatial world, and let's think about this in terms of um, photographic elements. And these photographic elements I'm providing for you for this are merely either JPEGs or PNGs. PNGs are going to have an alpha value, which means they're transparent. JPEGs can't do that, so keep that in mind. But I'm just going to try to create a small experience of like looking at elements that are photographic in a spatial element or stage. So what we see here is we have several layers. We have a bitter background. We have a Ponderosa 1, Ponderosa 2. We have an Eagle 1 and an Eagle 2. And right now, when you bring all these things in After Effects, it kind of just like plops into the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that everything has 3D elements turn on. Oh man, sometimes I love working with After Effects with a stylus. Other times I hate it because it's like too picky. And right now I can't like click off anything, and that drives me nuts. Good at this point to learn your shortcuts. So I just did Command Shift A, which means deselect all. If I did Command A, it selects all. Command Shift A, no one selected. So I have all of these different elements that are all in a 3D space. But how do I actually know that? We talked earlier about looking at this stage from either the camera view or from the top view or from the right. And if I took one of those and I said, hey, you know what, let's look at this from the right. This is what we're seeing. Everything is currently located at 0Z. And that is going to do us no good as far as feeling like there is an established depth and that relationship exists between these different layers. So I'm just going to go back to active camera just so I can see it, because it's really good for you to look at these things from a camera view, but then also bounce to the side view, top view, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, bitter background, let's look at your position value. And I'm going to start pushing that back. I'm going to grab that Z value, and I'll even hold shift down so that it goes through greater increments. I'll put it all the way back to like 6,000. But here's what happens. Now it looks like it's a tiny little piece. The good news is there is pixel information that can still fill our screen because that's how it was designed. So if I went to scale, I did Shift S, and I increase that value, come on, guy, so that it fills my screen somewhere around here. That's great. Now I'm back to enjoying that background. You can throw it far, 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 far away, and it might be the tiniest little thing. But you still have that freedom of saying, well, let's grow it back up again visually because it contains those pixels. Those pixels are what we're depending on. And as long as you're dealing with something even just as simple as 72 pixels per inch, it will satisfy this as long as it was built big enough for your environment. In this case, it's a 1920 by 1080. So if we go back and look at, instead of our active camera, but we look at this from the right, everything looks to be in line. However, I shoved that layer way back. So I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to hit Command minus, Command minus. All of a sudden I see something over on my right. This is the background layer, and that is the bitrate. So if I select it and I look at it from here, it highlights, it gives me the handles, gives me my little X, Y, and Z deal. So that's how much further back I pushed it through the Z value, the positive Z, I went, go, 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 get back there, go back there, go back there. And I stuck it back, but then I also zoomed it up. And because it's as tall as it is, that was the zoom. Okay. So I'm going to go back to active camera. I'm going to come back to something that I can actually see. And now if I wanted to think about, like, well, I have eagles and I have trees, and let's try to put them in a spatial area that works for me. I'm going to think about, you know, the first eagle and say, where do you live? It's really hard to define this spatial relationship unless I can think about this in a three-dimensional way. What I love about this perspective is that it shows me what my camera is collecting or observing. But what I can't see is that right view or maybe a top view, etc. So that's where the views come into handy. So at the bottom of this composition window, I have one view. One view is currently showing me my active camera. But maybe I can say, why don't you show me 4 views? And the 4 views pop up and they say, okay, well, we have an active camera, we have a right, we have a front, and we have a right. Well, it doesn't really make sense to have 2 rights. So I can go through and I can customize which windows they are just by clicking on it, and then it will highlight. I can tell which one's highlighted by these little blue arrows in the corner. I can say, well, yeah, how about instead of the right, we go with the top. Okay. This one, maybe the front is fine. It's one of those things I'll talk to you about in a little bit. And then this guy being the right. So we have an active camera. This is what the world is currently looking like. I might zoom out a little bit. This is what it looks like from the top. This is what it looks like from the front. And this is what it looks like from the right. One thing to note about the front is that it is non-perspective. So it doesn't care how far away something is or how close it might be to you. It will not draw things as if there is a distance. It will merely just show you where they are in a accurate X and Y environment. But like the top, if I were to click on the top and hit zoom out, and I also use spacebar to kind of move it around a little bit, I can see that here are the elements that are, you know, the eagles and the ponderosas, but there's that one that's in the background. If I want to see that here on the right, I'll click on the right and I'll hit Command minus just a couple times. And I'll use the space bar and kind of move it around. So this is my background plate, which is the mountains. This is my background plate, which is the mountains. And everything here is still like at ground zero. So this is the best time for us to see how you can move these things around. So I'm going to take Eagle 1. I'm going to say, hey, Eagle 1, what if you're, I don't know, like closer to me? So I'm going to hit P. That opens up a position. I'm going to bring it to a negative value. And maybe I'll even hold down Shift while I do it. And that's bringing that bird closer to me. I can see it in the active camera, but I can also see how it's moving in my right view. I can see how it's moving in my top view. At this point, I can use any of those values and say, I want you to go to the right or to the left. I can even just grab it in my active camera and say, yeah, you're going to fly in over here, so I'm going to set you there. Okay. So then the next one would be this other eagle. This eagle is back at 0, 0, and on the active camera, it just is like right where it was. So let's try to see how we can have some fun with some values of distance and say, let's open up P for that thing, and let's push it back a little bit. But then let's move it over. So I can use any of these. Where is it? Why don't I see it? There it is. Yeah. Any of these windows, you know, that would have been a lateral move. This would have been one. Actually, you wouldn't be able to tell since on the right view, you're bringing it towards you. These are views in which it does not give you perspective. So this is kind of my giveaway. Then lastly, I'm going to deal with these ponderosas. So the ponderosa 1, I want to bring it a whole lot closer to me. I could think about the right view, the top view, any of the views that make sense to you. So here I will just take my Z and I'm going to say, yeah, you're a tree and you're like way up here. I don't even want to see the trunk because it's garbage. But like now I can use this perspective and say you're over here. And I can start to see what this arrangement looks like in space from my different orthographic views. So from the top, here's this tree, here's that eagle, there's that eagle, and there's my background. From the right view, I can say, here's that tree, here's an eagle. I don't even know where the other one is, the other eagle. There it is, bam. This is hard to see on a checkerboard. Now the last thing is the other ponderosa tree. And that ponderosa tree, you know, maybe I plant it down a little bit. I'll use the camera view. But then maybe I want to move it back a little bit, so I'll use any of these values to move it in Z. And now I'll move it back over here. I'd like it to be bigger, and since I moved this thing further away, it's smaller, but I can definitely, since it has pixels, I can make it bigger. And there it is. I'll move it down a little bit. No, I didn't want to spin it. Thank you very much. I'll move you down. Maybe like over a little bit. And so the bird's in front of it. That's cool. And so now what we have is we have a stage that has foreground elements, midground elements, and background elements. There is no movement. So we would never know. It still looks like a postcard. But for us to have that experience of some engagement of what this space actually looks like, that's where movement needs to happen. And that's going to be either between the birds or the clouds or something like that. But most importantly, it's the movements that are going to help identify what that space is. And that's usually a camera or perhaps a null object. And so that's what we're going to hit up next here. So play around with looking at the different views, the different orthographic views, seeing what the camera is trying to buy or purchase in its little window, and how your elements in that world, as you move them forward, background, left or right, up or down, whatever, are going to start to establish what that captured image looks like. All right, thanks guys.